Most people think their injury isn't healing because they need the perfect exercise. But more often than not, they're stuck because they're making one of these mistakes. So in today's video, we're going to be covering 5 areas in terms of where people are commonly making mistakes and just a little bit of examples on putting them into practice and how to overcome them. So the first one is you are probably doing too much too soon. So a lot of people, when they start having reduced symptoms, reduced pain, they think, oh, brilliant, I'm injury free again. And injury and pain are 2 different things, and I'm going to talk about that very shortly. But they think, oh, I can go straight back into my sport. I can go straight back to high intensity training. I can go back to lifting, etc. Back at that same level of load before they injure themselves. So, for example, if you are a footballer, and I go for football straight away just because that's what my main sport was when I was growing up. If you were a footballer and you were sprinting down the line and you pulled your hamstring like the 70th minute, okay? Let's say before that injury, you were training 3 times per week. You had your 90 minutes match of the weekend, and then you were doing your own strength conditioning sessions around all those training sessions, okay? That's a lot of load that you were able to handle before. So when you first come back for your injury and, oh, I'm brilliant, I'm pain-free, must mean I can go back to my sport. What usually happens is people go straight back into their high intensity training. They go straight back to that level where they were before injury. And they haven't rebuilt the hamstring's capacity to be able to handle all those demands again. So what happens is, boom, they get a flare up of their injury. So some more examples here to help you understand a little bit better and a little bit clearer. Returning to running after having 3 pain-free days. Like I said, reduced pain doesn't always means that that irritated tissue is back to being able to handle that full load again. Adding too much weight too quickly. So a lot of injuries, for example, a lot of pain sort of stuff like tendons, they really don't like big increments. They really like small little gradual increases over time. Playing sport before strength and control is returned, that example I just spoke there about the footballer and the pulled hamstring, and doing rehab and full training at the same time without adjusted load. So my key takeaway from this point is your body doesn't just need time, it needs the right amount of stress at that right time. So rehab is all about having structured progression, being able to get you back from where your injury was, being able to handle those demands again. So if you were really fit and you, like I said, had 3 training sessions, doing all your strength conditioning sessions, you're able to handle 90 minutes of the weekend. We can't just jump straight back into that load again. We have to gradually expose you back to being able to handle more demands over time so your irritated tissue can handle those demands again. Otherwise, we just get an injury straight away. Point number 2 is you're resting too much and expecting time to fix everything. And this is probably the opposite mistake to number 1 is some people completely stop moving and they wait for the injury to disappear. Rest can help calm things down, but it rarely, like I said above, it rarely rebuilds the strength, tendon capacity, joint control, or confidence to be able to go back to those demands. So that's completely opposite. Some people do way too much too soon, and some people just do completely nothing and just rest and wait for their injury to go back. So they rely on passive modalities. So I'm going to speak about a couple of those, okay? So for example, some people when they're injured, they just rely on stretching the muscle back to being able to handle and being pain-free again. They rely on foam rolling, they rely on massage, they rely on other passive modalities that are done to them rather than them actively doing them. For example, dry needling, acupuncture, sports massage, etc. The misconception is they think that is physio, and a lot of these people that just provide those modalities to people, they don't provide the actual exercises to rebuild the tissue capacity. And they just say this is going to help you get back. Yes, it's going to help you have no pain. It's going to help to manage the pain. And in most injuries, and this is what I do, we manage the pain as much as we can, especially really early on. So we can do those adjuncts, such as exercise, or not adjunct. These are adjuncts to do alongside your exercises. But we can do your exercises where we can rebuild your tissue capacity as quickly as possible, and as efficient as possible, and effective as possible, okay? For some injuries, if we take an ACL repair, okay, an ACL reconstruction, when you come out of your surgery, you're going to have a lot of muscle inhibition, okay? You're going to have a lot of inhibition going into the quadriceps, and that is where when we're cut open, etc., the muscles around the knee joint, they become inhibited, so the nerve responses into those muscles just become... So for example, what I'd like to use is, imagine you've got a light, okay? I've got a light just here in front of me, and you know those ones that twist it and dim it and down and stuff. So there's still information going to those muscles, but it's a lot dimmed, okay? And we have to be able to get that electricity and that light back up to 100%. So a lot of modalities really help with that, so massage, etc. And TENS equipment, so stimulus. I'm going off on a tangent now as well, but a lot of these modalities really help for us to be able to actually then get the most out of those exercises, being able to engage the muscles again, improve that mind to muscle connection again, so we can get the most out of the exercises and get the most stimulus to be able to rebuild that tissue capacity. I went off on a tangent there, but it makes sense. For example, another area where people go wrong with this, just to help it make it a bit more clear, is resting a tendon injury for weeks and then pain returns when running. So they just rest, they do nothing, whereas in the first mistake we spoke about, they do too much. This is where people just do nothing and they think, okay, brilliant, no pain, I can go back straight away again. Some people, they avoid in squats for knee pain, but they never rebuild the tolerance to be able to handle those squats again. So, and this is where a lot of coaches go wrong as well, where someone says, oh, I've got pain on squat, and again they say just don't do squats. And then they build this really fear-mongering around squats. But how can we actually, this is what I do with my clients, how can we still do the movement pattern, but at the level that you're able to handle? So if you've got pain or anterior knee pain when you're doing a barbell back squat, how can we regress that exercise all the way down to find a movement pattern of a squat pattern that you're not getting pain with? So it could be regress back down to a barbell box squat, so we're controlling the depth. It could be doing a split squat where we're controlling the shin angle of the front knee, so it's a vertical shin angle, so we've not got a lot of load going into the front of the knee. It could be doing a banded Spanish squat hold. And then the aim is to gradually expose you back to being able to tolerate this, the same thing, the same movement pattern that caused the pain in the first place. Or stopping all shoulder work, and then pain returns as soon as they get back to pressing again. So my key takeaway for point 2 is rest can be very useful early on, but rehab is what bridges the gap between feeling better and being ready. We don't want just to feel better, we need to be ready for the sport and the actions that we want to get back to. Number 3, and I think I actually spoke about this on one of my social media platforms, chasing pain relief. So this is mistake 3, chasing pain relief instead of rebuilding capacity. So it links in very much with point number 2 and point number 1, where people are either doing too much too soon, or they're not doing enough and they just focus on pain relief. But some people, they just focus on pain relief alone and they don't do any of the exercises. So people often only do things that make them feel better and make the injured area feel better short term. Foam rolling, like I said, massage, heat, ice, any passive mobility exercises or painkillers. So exactly what I just spoke about earlier in point number 2. And these areas, and these can really help with symptoms, but they don't always improve the underlying capacity of the issue. For example, and this is what I like to use, if you're a rugby player and you're getting hit by 120 kg blokes and you've got an injury and you've got back pain, just relying on stretching or foam rolling is not going to be able to allow your back to be able to be handled. I mean, can't get my words out there. It's not going to be able to actually allow your back to handle the demands of getting hit by 120 kg blokes again. It's just not. So we need to be able to rebuild the strength. We rebuild your confidence being able to go back on the sport. Because if you're not confident, your perception of pain and your perception of threat might increase your sensitivity to pain again. And that's where we start getting confused and with other complicated. And we might have another video talking about that. So like I said, the key line here is if your rehab is only aiming to make you feel better for a few hours, but it doesn't actually make you stronger over weeks, it's probably not solving the problem. It's just painting over a couple of cracks. It's like a band-aid solution. Okay, I point up there just because I've got a fantastic book that I would advise you guys reading. And this is what I use with my clients, and this is principle, okay? It's the 80-20 principle by either Richard Koch or Richard Koch. Okay, hopefully I didn't get sensitized by YouTube for that. But this is a fantastic book, and it talks about having, it's called the 80-20 principle, and it talks about we can either, and this is for all things in life, a lot of people put 80% of their effort in getting 20% of the results. So foam rolling, massage, ice, they're doing so much of their effort focused on something that only brings back 20% of the results. Whereas in what you need to do is focus on those smaller things. So focus on just the 20% that brings 80% of the results. For example, focus on your strength training, focus on your sleep, focus on your nutrition, focus on your hydration, focus on your psychological welfare in terms of making sure you're not stressed with work, or stressed with being out injured, etc. These things actually gives you 80% of the results. Whereas people think they're being really busy, really productive with doing all these modalities, getting their massage, getting all these things, and they're not actually doing the things that matter the most. So some mistakes that people do, and examples here: constantly stretching tight calves, but not strengthening them. Massaging the hip flexor, but not improving hip strength control. Using a massage gun on the shoulder, but not rebuilding press and tolerance. Okay, so people often just put all their attention, their focus on the wrong things. So my big key takeaway here is relief is useful, but capacity is what gets you back to training. Moving on to number 4, and that is your rehab isn't progressive enough. And this is where, I don't want to say it, but perhaps if you're working with a physiotherapist or working with other people, I've heard some real bad horror stories, but this is perhaps where things are probably going wrong for yourself, okay? So a lot of people with their physios, I'll use an example. I was working with one client in particular. He went to his NHS physio and he had patellar tendon pain, okay? So jumper's knee, patellar tendon, where your tendon just underneath your kneecap, okay? So if you've got insensitivity or irritation there. He went to his NHS physio and they gave him 2 exercises to do for 12 weeks. They didn't say how to progress them. They didn't say do more reps or sets over time, do more weight. They just gave him 2 exercises and expected that to be enough to be able to handle him, or to get him back to football and being able to handle those demands. Many people just do the same 3 rehab exercises forever, like I just said there. They're going to help at first, but what happens is the body adapts and the stimulus becomes too easy, and actually then doesn't able to allow them to progress back to their sport. So they could be really good at managing the pain or managing the symptoms initially, but that's all they're good for. And it's not progressing enough to be able to handle back the sport demands that your body places upon it. An example that I like to use for this is if you're climbing up a mountain or a volcano, or you're hiking up a hill. Usually with some of these, you'll have a steep incline going up. Then it might plateau for a little bit. So that steep incline initially is going to be quite hard. You're going to be breathing quite a lot. But when we come to a flat area, we're going to adapt. Everything's going to become a little bit easier. And we're like, oh, I'm okay again. I've got my energy back. I'm ready. A lot of people just stop there. And then they just keep those exercises and they think, oh, being pain-free means I'm back ready again. Okay, but that's a big jump from where we need to get back to. So if we're here and we want to get back up to here, we're only here. And we want to get to the top of the mountain. So what happens again, we need to progress the exercise intensity. So we need to progress the exercise intensity. I'm just going to show you here on talking about these. We need to progress the exercise intensity. Sorry for repeating myself. More load, more range of motion, more reps or sets, having a slower tempo, more complexity, more speed, or more sport-specific demands. So we need to progress the intensity. So what happens of that climbing up the mountain analogy, we've plateaued, and it means our body is adapted to that stimulus. We're able to earn the right to progress again. Rather than just waiting for time to progress. We have to earn the right to progress. So we're at that flat bit, and that means, okay, brilliant, our body's adapted. We can now progress the exercise intensity again. So we can progress it, like I said, via the more load, more range of motion, more intensity, more reps and sets. So we progress again until we get to a flat bit where our body adapts to those exercises and that stimulus again. And we could be, if the injury isn't bad, we could be back to where we want to go to the top. Or it could be we're halfway through our recovery. We then, okay, we've adapted. We need to progress the intensity again. So hopefully that all makes sense, where we've gone from the bottom of the hill and the mountain. We've adapted. we can progress again, go walk again, adapted, progress and walk up again until we're back to that top area, okay? So my key takeaway from this point is, if your rehab looked the same as week 1, then what it does in week 6, it's probably not enough to move you forwards. We need to continue to progress the exercise intensity. And that's what I do with my clients, not just shamelessly plug myself again, but for example, I had this one chap who I'm still working with a long-term client now, but when we first started working with each other, he had a very, very nasty lower limb fracture where he's got a lot of plates and bone and joints and pins in his legs, okay? When we first started working with each other, we just needed to regain range of motion through body weight stuff and etc. Regaining his ankle mobility, regaining his tolerance to be able to, his calves to feel a good pump and get some good exercises into them, rebuilding the strength. Now he's back. We needed to get back to playing squash. So each level of our rehab progresses and progresses and progresses. If I just kept him doing those ankle mobility exercises, that's no way near enough for him to be able to handle the demands of being able to go for an 11K run and then the next day play squash physically demanded. We needed to rebuild the capacity and the strength of all of his lower limb tissues. And unfortunately, and this is where I don't want to like to say it, but unfortunately, this is where a lot of rehab plans go completely wrong. And point number 5 is you're probably skipping the boring foundations. And this is very, very relatable for a lot of you people. People want advanced drills. They want the sexy return to sport exercises, the plyometrics, the heavy lifts before they've restored the basic movement quality, strength, balance, and control. A lot of this looks very sexy, don't they? You see it all over social media. So many sexy, exciting exercises, and you just want to jump straight into them. And they skip all the boring steps and they don't lay the foundation to be able to earn the right. You know how I just mentioned in the previous point, we have to earn the right to progress. We have to earn the right to do those sexy things. So some examples here for you. Trying to sprint before we have really good single leg strength and before that quality and the strength is restored. Jumping when we've got poor landing control. Pressing overhead when our shoulder blade control is poor. Running with painful calf weakness. So if we've not rebuilt all of those really good foundations, we're never going to be able to handle going back to running. We're never going to be able to sprint if our single leg strength is not restored and able to handle those physical demands. Okay, so advanced rehab only works when we've laid down those foundations and they're there to support it. So imagine your house. What do they do with the first thing when building a house? They lay the foundations. They do the boring stuff, the simple stuff, because without those foundations, you're just going to have a house that just falls over. Okay, the boring stuff, and this is my key takeaway for this point, is the boring stuff is often what earns you the right to do those exciting stuff again. Sorry, guys, it's my lunchtime. I'm probably getting a little bit too excited, but I feel like some air is just coming out. I don't know what it is, guys, so I apologize for that. But yeah, we need to be able to do the boring foundations, the boring simple stuff. You know how I just spoke about in the previous point, one of my clients who we had that nasty lower limb fracture. We had to restore his ankle range of motion. We have to restore all the very basic boring stuff in order to progress through his rehab to be able to handle those sexy, exciting, demanding stuff. And that's where a lot of people go wrong. They either don't do enough, they just rest and then just jump straight back into those sexy, exciting stuff that you see all over social media, or they just progress their rehab way too quickly. You have to earn the right, okay? And that's where really good structured progressive rehab comes into play, and where our expertise goes in. You're not supposed to, sorry, I keep looking at the screen. You're not supposed to know how to do that. You're not supposed to do it on your own. That's where our expertise comes in, okay? So hopefully all of that has been very, very helpful for you. Like I said, this is going to be a 2-part video series. So in the next video, we're going to be talking, I'm just going to give you a very quick overview of what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about how you don't have clear criteria for progression. That's another mistake. Another mistake is you keep flaring it up and calling it a setback. You're ignoring sleep, stress, nutrition, recovery. We're going to be talking about you're treating the painful area, but missing the contributing factors. We're also going to be talking about you're too inconsistent. So my final takeaway message from this, and hopefully you have understood the clarity of what I'm talking about, and hopefully it's drummed home for you guys. But my final key takeaway message from this is the goal of rehab isn't just to make the pain go away. The goal of rehab is to rebuild the capacity, your confidence and tolerance that your body needs so that the injury doesn't just keep coming back. Okay? And if you are tired of your rehab and you don't know how to do it, or you might be working with someone else and you're not seeing the progress that you want, and you need the structured plan to build around it, build around your injury, your goals and your training, and you want to work with myself on online one-to-one, then go down to the description box, fill out the inquiry form, and I'll be in touch what the service is, give you a load of information and just how all the important stuff in working with myself online and what it looks like. Okay, so hopefully the video has been very valuable and beneficial for you. As you can tell, I'm getting used to doing these videos, these longer form content. I'm not expecting masterpieces and engaging videos straight away, but hopefully they get better over time. But yeah, thanks for very much for sticking around if you made it to this end part of this video, and we'll see you on the next one.